Welcome to the official YouTube channel for the Urban Farmer Podcast. Hit subscribe so you don't miss a single episode. Now let's jump right into it. It's a flashback, The Urban Farmer, as originally recorded 10 years ago with myself and farmer Curtis Stone. Welcome to The Urban Farmer, week 21. For 20 weeks, you've heard the story of Curtis Stone. Curtis is an urban farmer who's farmed professionally for 5 years. At this point in the season, it's pretty obvious that Curtis knows what he's doing and he's very successful as an urban farmer. He might not know all the answers, but he has an approach that works. And when something doesn't work out, or when he doesn't know the answer, he has the wherewithal to answer that question and solve the problem quickly so he can keep moving forward. That's Curtis. But a lot of you listening to this show are new farmers or aspiring farmers. And I know that it's hard for someone new to farming to look at Curtis and say, I could never do that. Or why isn't my farm running like that? Or why am I not producing that many greens? Keep in mind that this is day 2000 into farming for Curtis. Not day 100 or day 30 or day 0. Day 2000. There were a lot of mistakes and a lot of trial and error that happened over the last 2,000 days that went into the Curtis that you hear from today. But what about the early days? What was farming like at day 100? Today we're answering that question, but it won't be Curtis giving the answer. In this episode, Curtis and I are joined by new farmer Rob Kaiser. Rob is a few months into his farming journey, and like Curtis, he didn't come from a farming background. Rob came from the corporate world. A few years ago, he realized that the path he was on wasn't right for him anymore, and he needed to change. One part of the change was an entry into farming. In this episode, Rob will talk about his transition into farming and the plan that he put in place to make that transition possible. He'll touch on how he's dealt with not knowing everything, and how he's dealt with the good times and the really bad times that are unavoidable when you start any new business venture. One key to Rob's progress has been to surround himself with successful people to make his go a little easier by leveraging their experience. And it's worked, because progress is being made and Rob is slowly making the change that he not too long ago dreamed about. The idea, the dream, has become a reality. It's happening. For all the new and aspiring farmers out there, this episode will shed some light on the early parts of the journey, showing that you aren't alone, even though we all feel like we are at times. There are others out there trying to do what you want to do. Keep at it and be the change. And as Rob will say in this episode, you may not be able to change the world, but you can change yours.
2 years ago, I made the decision to move back here to Ohio. At that time, I was on the tail end of my career path at that time. I had turned 30, determined that I needed to, that it was going to be in my best interest to start a career and climb the proverbial corporate ladder, and I did that, and quite frankly, I did it well. But that left me longing for a lot more, because that's not what a lot of us are wired to do. There's a lot of things in that lifestyle that really aren't human anymore, but we're almost programmed to be that way, to be what our families raised us to be the way society wants us to be the way our friends are. And so, a long story short, my parents years ago, maybe about 7 or 8 years ago, sold the house we grew up in, bought some land out in the country, and the idea was they were going to build their retirement home. And it was, half of this land was conventionally farmed, and the housing bubble hit, and to make a long story short, they ran into some financial troubles and thought, well, we have this land and it used to be farmed, but we don't really like conventional farming. So they tried to make a stab at market farming, not knowing anything. My parents in their 60s. And for the first few years, I told them they were crazy. I told them to sell the land. I told them that it was stupid. And eventually, when I reached a point in my own life and my own career path where I started questioning everything that I was doing, I thought maybe there is something to what they're doing. And I took a long, hard look at the opportunities that were there, and I convinced them to lease, to engage in a lease with me on this land, and really, through guys like you, Curtis, and a lot of other people out there that are making things happen without owning land, I kind of followed that lead to the best of my ability, incorporating what was applicable to me and my situation, and started doing the same thing. And this is my second season, working with my parents in large part on a parcel of land that I leased through them, selling it at market.
It's a cool story. When you think back to a few years ago when they tried to make a go of market farming, you thought they're crazy. Given your worldview then, why did you think they were crazy for doing that?
Well, they both had jobs. They both, and to make ends meet, they were doing their own hustle. They both had a side job in addition to their normal job. They both commuted from where we're not way out in the country here. This land is about 45 minutes, for some context, about 45 minutes from downtown Cleveland, Ohio, and about 45 minutes from Akron, Ohio, in either direction. And they were doing a lot of driving, pushing 45 minutes one way. So basically they would go to work, they'd come home, they'd change clothes, they'd go work the land until dark, and wash, rinse, repeat, and they did this daily. And they weren't having a whole lot of successes, or at least what I viewed as success. That's a big thing, is, what I viewed as success. That's not what they were doing. And I would hear them complain about things. Oh, we're not able to do this. We're not having success in this regard. And I thought, well, what are you doing then? Just stop it. Cut your losses. Sell the property. Go move closer to work. Enjoy your life. But what I failed to realize is that the struggles to do that was living a better life. They were actively living the change that they wanted to experience in their own lives, and while they didn't come right out and say that, I can look back and think, well, that's in large part what they were doing, because that's in a different way. I'm doing it in my own way now.
So you saw them, you thought they were crazy. What flipped the switch in your mind to say, I want to make a go of this, I want to take on farming?
Well, I have some experience in the green industry, and that's maybe something I can touch on later. But after going through several years of climbing the ladder, once I got my big boy job when I was in my early and mid 30s, a couple things happened in life. I went to a wedding. I got together with friends I hadn't seen in years, and I spent so much time on the roads, spent so much time in strategic planning meetings and, tactical meetings, discussing the week and where we were with our accounts, and, how were our projections and all this stuff. that once I finally got out and reunited with friends from years past, you know, and saw where everybody was at a wedding, I realized, man, there's a whole lot more to life than chasing stuff, including but not limited to a job title, a career path, the company car, you know, the bonus, the this, the that. There's relationships, there's people, there's community, there's life, you know, and that's when you get a taste of that after not having it for a long time, that hits you like a ton of bricks and really makes you evaluate some things that are going on in your life and where you're headed with your life.
Oh, for sure, I hear you, and I think that story is the story that has ran through a lot of people's lives in this sector, and it's the story that's running through a lot of people's heads right now. When you decided, or when you saw this, that a different life was possible, did you have an initial thought or game plan on, I can go into farming and this is how I'm going to make it pay or cash flow and support yourself? Did you have an initial direction you were going to focus on?
Yes and no. I knew that in order to do what I wanted to do, which at that point, a couple of years ago, what it was that I wanted to do was really nothing more than not what I was currently doing. I needed to make a change now, you know, and I didn't really, I knew the path that I was on wasn't the right path for me. Maybe it is for other people, and that's okay. This isn't about them. This, you know, and that was a time where I had to just say, okay, I don't necessarily know what I'm doing. I don't necessarily know where I'm going, but that was, ironically enough, that was right around, not ironically enough, this is how things work. This is synchronicity. This is life. It was right around the time that I started tuning into your podcast, Diego, Permaculture Voices, and I'm hearing all these people doing all these things, and I just start thinking, all right, I may not know what I'm doing or where I'm going, but those guys do. And I need to surround myself with those guys, because if I look to people that appear to have some semblance of what they're doing and some ideas, you know, just the way that it works is, you know, you see people that are doing things that you want to do, you surround yourselves with them, and more often than not, you by default are raised up to their level. And that's kind of what I did. And then I would take things from each person, each group, each thing that people were doing, and I'd say, well, I like that, I don't like that. How can I incorporate that into my life? And because I was so passionate about it, I started going through all of this stuff, and started going down this road with determination, and it was an accelerated manner. I was streaming podcasts all day, you know, because I was working out in the field, and that was part of the thing. I determined what I needed to do to position myself towards an exit strategy that would get me to where I wanted to be as quickly as possible, and also make the money that I needed to do that, because more often, I mean, at that time I had debt. I still had some school loans. I wasn't in the position where I could just drop everything. You know, I have some other things going on in my life that require, you know, a lot of people have families, and they need to be mindful of, you know, medical benefits and things of that nature. And I do too. I'm not unlike anybody else out there. There's life stuff that needs to happen, and in order to make sure all that life stuff is accounted for, you have to be very deliberate in your approach to moving forward with the exit strategy that's going to assist you in getting to where you want to be in the time frame that you want to be there.
So what was your thinking in terms of the macro approach of setting yourself up to get to where you want to be? And I don't need to know necessarily all the steps involved, but how did you, from a zoomed out view, really approach that? Because that is something that holds a lot of people back, is they get overwhelmed with, just like you said, life, and they just freeze and don't do anything, even though they want to do that thing. They don't, I think, even know how to plan to get there.
Right. And for me, the biggest part was reaching freedom in terms of finances. I needed to get out of debt. And I made some sacrifices to do that. I took extra jobs. I made some changes in my living situation. I cut back things. I did my best to live on a budget, which was a new thing for me. I never really hurt for much, but at the same time, I just had the general attitude of complacency, which is becoming more and more dominant in the society in which we live. And I just realized that for me, the best thing I could do was work towards becoming debt free. And then that would provide me with a level of security that I never had. And, I think that's important to work towards, even if you have, a house payment or a car payment. There's ways that I don't have those things right now. I may in the future, but I suspect if or when I do, I'll leverage those things in a way that's beneficial for me doing what it is that I want to do. I want to make everything that I've got going on work for me rather than be a slave to it.
There you go. I like that approach, and I think debt's a big one for a lot of people, and I know for sure that it's one thing that holds a lot of people back. One other thing that you mentioned that can also, I think, paralyze a lot of people is this idea of, I don't know what I'm doing. And I think that also kind of runs concurrently with, there's so much information out there, I don't know what to focus on. How did you deal with not knowing what you were doing at the beginning?
I just tried to do something because there's so much to do. And if you think about, and I say it never happens to me because it happens to me frequently. And I'm sure it happens to you, and I'm sure it happens to Curtis and everybody else that's listening. It's sometimes a heck of a lot easier to look at everything that I can't. Man, there's so much going on. I don't even know where to start. Well, just pick something. Just start. You just start. Doesn't matter what. Just do anything. And try and, track that somehow. Get some metrics to it so you can look back in a week or a month and say, for me, I use a program called Evernote, which is like my second brain. And as I complete tasks, they go into a completed folder. So if I start to think about, I'm not getting anything done, I can look back and say, no, you know what? I am. Like, I'm making progress. And that's what's important. I mean, it's not so much important exactly what you start with. It's just important that you start.
Yeah, I like that approach because this is something I've seen, and Curtis will echo this. Curtis has came down and given 2 workshops in Southern California, and in one of the workshops, somebody's like, Curtis, this is all great, but I could never do what you're doing. And, I mean, Curtis, you can probably talk on this, but I'm sure you hear that all the time. And what's your answer to that when people say that?
Well, it's just this whole thing that people, they put themselves beneath others because they see something that they're doing and it intimidates them because they think, oh, wow, they're doing that so well, they must just be good at it. Because when they're seeing somebody like myself or even like Rob or any of us who come to present something, they're seeing a snapshot image of that right now. They're not seeing all the thousands of hours of work it took to get to that point. And that's the thing, is that, they're not seeing the whole picture. So, it's like, well, dude, don't put yourself beneath me. It's just understand that so much work went into this, and that's what it is. It isn't just like, I didn't just arrive here. I didn't just, show up and have all this stuff happen. I worked my ass off. I probably cried my eyes out on sometimes because it was so painful or so hard, but they're not seeing that. They're just seeing this person who showed up in their town who's talking about this great thing they're doing, and then they're turning you into an idol. And I think that's a huge failure that isn't just common. It's so prevalent in society. It's something that really keeps people down because they just assume that, something was either privileged or was gifted to them in some way, or it's just talent. You're just naturally good at that. That's BS. I'm not naturally good at farming. I just worked my ass off, and I really sucked at it for a while, and I just failed 1,000 times more than the average person, but it didn't stop me. So that's really the only difference, and I think that's really what it is.
Yeah, totally. And, Rob, you're a few months, is that fair to say, into your exploration into market farming?
A few months, yeah. It's tough because I'm still working a full-time job. I work, 50, 60 hours a week at times when it's busy. So I do as much as I can. It's not as much as I want, but this is the second season I've worked here, and last year was the first season I actively worked as a, big air quotes, market farmer. No, not big air quotes. I'm not doing that anymore. This is what I'm doing.
I like that distinction there.
Yeah, as long as we keep saying, well, I'm trying to be this and I'm trying to be that. It's like Curtis was saying, it's not about what we're trying to do. And clearly I'm not Curtis, and I'm not farming at the capacity that he is or the level that he is. And that's okay. But everybody starts somewhere. Curtis, you didn't get to where you are overnight. You started somewhere too. And so we're not big air quotes, market farming. We're doing it. We're starting it.
How's it been working the full-time job while doing this essentially on the side? And I know from hearing you, it sounds like, okay, it's a necessity, and that's probably a reality and a realistic route for a lot of people who want to get into this. It's challenging, but have you kind of found a groove? Have you been able to manage it? Is it working?
It's working in the best way that I can make it work right now. It's working because we talked about failures, and I could expand at great length about a lot of them because there are, but there's also certain things that have worked, and I'm trying real hard to focus a lot less on the things that have failed and focus a lot more on the things that have not, the things that have been successful. And because we all try and do so much, it becomes really easy to look at all of that so much that we do and say, man, so much of it sucks. But there's a whole lot of it compared to a lot of people that aren't doing anything. That those portions that we do that are successes that's a big deal. So, trying to balance the farming with my day job is not easy, but I understand that this is where I need to be right now. I have some goals and objectives and time frames that I'm working towards with transitioning away from what I'm doing, but I really also want to look at my day job as a blessing. And I'm so grateful to have the job that I had. I transitioned out of, big corporate world job to working for a small, local, family-owned business. I don't travel like I used to. I still put in a lot of hours, but it's a dramatic step in the right direction, and I'm gonna I'm not going to look a gift horse in the mouth, and I'm just going to appreciate where I'm at and understand that it took me many, 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 many years to get to where I am now, and to get to where I want to be. It's not going to happen overnight, and it's not going to happen in a year, and it's probably not going to happen in 5. But if I approach it with tenacity, it's going to get there sooner than later.
With working the full-time job, how many hours would you say you have a week to work on the farm?
I broke this down into a spreadsheet and crunched some numbers. There's 168 hours in a week. Typically, I work anywhere from 50 to 60 hours at my full-time job. I try very hard due to some medical conditions to get a solid 8 hours of sleep a night. Whether you have things going on in your life, it's important to stay rested. If you don't, regardless of where you're at and what you're dealing with in your life, you will not function in the time that you do have available to you at peak capacity. And in order to excel and succeed and reach those goals that we have, we got to be firing on all 8 cylinders. We got to stay rested. That is important as doing the actual work itself. If you're doing the work to get to where you want to be, but you're doing it half-assed, well, then you're not doing it right. And I'm not consistent with that approach all the time, but I'm trying to be more mindful of it. So, the amount of hours that I put into the farm and other little side ventures that I do is probably close to, 25 hours a week.
Okay, right there. So let's hold that there. So 20 to 25 hours a week. And you said you focus on what works, and you've kind of not focused so much on what doesn't work. I like that strategy. So where I'm going with this is you have 20 to 25 hours a week that you're working on the farm. What stuff are you focusing on with that time? Because you have a finite amount of time, and I think you're very good at saying, okay, this is where I want to be. So I'm curious to know how you're attacking this, given that you don't have 80 hours a week to put into it. So I'm thinking, okay, he's going to be working on the stuff that he thinks matters most, and he's going to focus on that. So is there that type of approach there? And if so, what are you focusing your efforts on?
Yeah, that's a good question. In the particular situation where I'm at, I wish all of that time could be devoted strictly to farm tasks, building my soil, working with the crops that I have in the ground. Some of that time is spent doing maintenance tasks around the farm for the owners, cutting, trying to keep things cleaned, looking tidy. That's part of the arrangement that I have with them to lease the land that I'm leasing. In addition to doing just regular routine maintenance work, I have crops in the ground. I did some experiments with sheet mulching and things like that earlier in the year that were epic failures. In order to compensate for the crop losses that I have for the crops in the ground, which aren't performing very well, I switched gears and tried my hand at growing microgreens, because after looking at some numbers and taking part in this awesome course that Curtis has got going on, a Profitable Urban Farmer course, and I'm learning a lot from there and applying a lot of what I'm learning into my life and into my farm and into those operations. So we're doing okay with taking new skill sets, applying them to the challenges and failures that we've had, and ultimately trying to adapt, improvise, and overcome and turn the failures into successes. And that's what's happening.
So what are your thoughts on this, Curtis, hearing this and knowing a little bit of Rob just from working with him in the course?
It's exactly, it's not exactly, but it's more or less what everybody goes through when when they're trying to do this, when they're trying to transition, when they're trying to start something that goes against the grain of what society might tell you to do. I echo pretty much everything Rob has to say, and it's funny because one thing that I find really comforting in the thought of is that there's always somebody better than you, so get over it. And I hear that in Rob's voice too, because he's like, it's not the ultimate thing, but I'll get there, and that's so important. That's such a good thing to understand earlier on in the game, because so many people will just beat themselves up about not having something perfect. They'll look at somebody else, so the whole grass is greener on the other side thing, is that they'll say, oh, and they'll just compare themselves to that person. But it's funny too, because if, say, Rob was omnipotent, which he's not, but if he was, he would see that there are people in his circle that are probably looking at him now and saying, oh man, Rob's just got it going on. Like, he's changing his life. He's on this new career path. He's crushing it. And so it's just like, you just change places in this endless staircase of, are you on the underside or are you on the upper side? And that's just the infinity of life. And it's so good to understand these things early on, because you will never achieve like the ultimate. There's always something better. You become a millionaire, and then all of a sudden your peer circle are 10 millionaires. And then you achieve $10 million, and then your peer circle are people who have $100 million or $1 billion. And it never ends, because there's always somebody better. So it's like, just get over that right away. Be content with where you are, and just crush it and have fun doing it. And what I hear in Rob's story is, like, what I really appreciate about it is his stoicism, is his willingness to just work his ass off right now, knowing that he's building for something better. And that's exactly what I did. That's exactly what every successful entrepreneur or farmer that I know has done. And it's what this nation was built on. It's what America and Canada were built on, are these hard-working immigrants that came into this country and worked their asses off and built something great. Not that I'm like a nationalist or a patriot or anything like that. I'm quite the opposite, as Rob and you are familiar with. But it's what created this abundant lifestyle that we appreciate today. And, it's something that people have forgotten. People today, most people, I think, at least the ones that I see day to day, have forgotten about the struggle of the entrepreneur.
Yeah, and Rob, you're one of these people out there making a go of it. And Rob, you didn't come from a farming background, but you've worked in industry. You said you were very successful at working your way up through the corporation. What are some skills that you can draw on from that side of your work life and that part of your work past that you think have helped you so far in terms of farming, and that you think will really help you going forward?
There's a lot. And while I don't come from a farming background, while I was climbing that corporate ladder, the industry that I was working in, I was doing consulting work for utilities in their vegetation management programs. And so it's almost irrelevant what the nature of the consulting work was, but that's what I did. And there was a lot of work with people and clients, accounts, management, interpersonal relationships, contractual stuff with the clients, with local and federal government to a certain extent. And to a certain extent, there was even some computer programming, because with the vegetation management systems, we used geographic information systems, GIS-based programs. And while I didn't work directly and I wasn't a programmer, I certainly worked with people that did. And none of that's farming, but at the same time, I feel that I can apply a lot of those skill sets to what I'm doing now. I can go talk with people that are running a successful farm and have been for a while, and I have the ability to approach somebody and say, what are you doing? How are you doing this? How are you making it work? Having a conversation much like the one that we're having now. What works? What doesn't? Why doesn't it? What have you done? What have you learned? How do you overcome? And that's what's important is you don't have to be a farmer. You don't, but take the skill set that you have, because if we really look at everything that we have going for us in the here and now, there's a whole lot more going for us than we will most likely give ourselves credit for, and that can be applied to what it is that we want to do.
I'm with you there. I think people totally undervalue what they know, and they I don't want to say overvalue, they put too much emphasis on what they don't know, and that doesn't allow them to start. And I think Curtis and I have talked about this in previous shows. Like, everybody knows something in their background that's going to help them do this, and nobody's going to know everything from square one going in. You know, Curtis, you came from the musician background into farming. I mean, the total unlikely route that anybody would have thought. And, you know, I don't know, when you tell people that you went to school for a musician, you know, are people just like their jaw drop when they see what you're doing now?
It depends on who I'm telling it to. People often laugh because I just have so much to make fun of myself with, like just trying to be a struggling dirt poor musician for so long. And I always tell people, like, if you think farming's hard, try being a working musician. It's like, at least with farming, there's a product you can sell right away and that people want. You know, when you're an indie avant-garde band that is playing totally non-commercial music, like, you know, you've got nothing to sell and you work your ass off, and, you know, it's just underappreciatedness left and right. So, yeah, I mean, people, sometimes people's jaw drops. But at the same time, I find a lot of people go, oh, wow, you finally figured it out. Because I think for myself as a musician, it was kind of like the joke was on me for so long and I never really realized it. And not to like slam being a musician. It's just that it wasn't for me. It wasn't, I mean, I still am a musician. I still play music. I love music. I listen to music all the time. Still understand music on a pretty deep level. But being the working musician just wasn't for me. And the biggest lesson that I pulled from that is that we often go through life I found that the belief in abandoning the belief in destiny has been completely liberating for me in that regard, because and again that's going back to this determinism thing, is that I was convinced that was my calling, that's what I was meant to do, and some people never figure it out. Some people, I still have tons of friends, I love them to death, but they still haven't figured it out. They're still going at this thing, pushing 40 now, and they're totally amped up if their band of 5 members makes $500 at a gig on a Saturday night. You know, they're stoked. I mean, and I'm just like going, oh my God, like, you know, how long can you do that for? And the longer you do it, you know, the more life passes you by. And, you know, it's kind of the opposite of Rob's approach, which I see as a real stoicism, the ability to, you know, hustle now and with the future in mind, thinking that I'm going to put creature comforts aside at the moment, knowing that I'm going to benefit from it in the future.
Well, you're right. I mean, Rob's hustling, making a go of it here, and I like the point that you made there of when you're farming, you have something tangible to sell right away, and with music, you don't. So in terms of that, in your experience, Rob, what has been your experience selling product for the first time, going to market? What have you learned through that whole exercise?
I'm learning that just because I like something and I think it's a good idea, that doesn't necessarily mean that the market does. and just because I like something and think it's a good idea doesn't mean that I have the ability to produce it and produce it successfully. So there's a balance of finding what you can actually grow and have as a good marketable product and what people want. And I tried doing a whole bunch of different things, different kinds of vegetables, and most of them didn't work. For me right now, based on the area that I'm working, which is not, I don't have great soil. I'm here in the Midwest. I'm in Ohio. The land that I'm working is degraded farmland. It has been conventionally farmed for decades, and the soil structure is poor. The everything about the soil is poor. So crops that require a lot of work and a lot of nutrients and are heavy feeders, and they just aren't working. But what is, lettuce, my lettuces are doing well, and I'm realizing that, okay, maybe I can't do Brussels sprouts and cabbages and, kale. I sort of worked, but my broccolis and the this and the that, the beets and the carrots and all that stuff. I want to grow all that stuff because it's cool, but it doesn't perform. And if you're trying to do things that aren't performing, you're spinning your wheels. So, again, I did it last year. I did it this year because I have to learn things the hard way. And I'm hoping that next year, through my improvements at documenting and journaling, that I'll take what worked and do more of that and focus on the successes, and instead of trying 15 new things next year, maybe I'll try 2. Go with what you know.
What's your thought on that, Curtis, in terms of maybe there's a crop that's not working to the best of what it can, say kale in Rob's case. How long do you think you tinker with it and try and make it work and adapt the soil and change your conditions before you just say no? Especially if you know the market, there's demand and you can sell it if you can grow it. Like, how do you deal with this? I can't quite grow it perfectly yet. How much longer do you tinker around before you say, yeah, it's not worth growing?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And there's no real silver bullet to that answer. But one thing that I do, and I'm pretty quick to move on right now, but that's because I've grown 90 different types of vegetables, and I've seen what works in the market and what doesn't, and in various different market streams. I've seen what works in different microclimates and different types of soils, what crops are prone to pests and whatnot. And I'm pretty quick to do it now because I'm on my 6th year farming, and I spent a ton of time trying to figure these things out and research them and play test them and trial and error. I'm quick to do it now because I've gone through that experience. At the time when I was going through those trial and errors, I wasted. There's some crops I grew for 2 years until I figured out that they weren't worth growing. My strategy to it now, though, is to approach it just like a business thing. Is look at the net return, look at your labor, look what you're putting in, look at the other inputs you have, whether it's fertilizer or anything else, pest protection, season extension. What does that crop require to get the outcome that you're looking for? And if you crunch the numbers and it seems like, okay, it doesn't really work, then just get rid of the crop. If you go, okay, it's not horrible, it's not great, it could be definitely improved on, My approach is now to scale that crop down considerably and just grow it and play around with it in a small isolated area and see what you can do from there, and then focus the rest of that area to production. And I'm on a smaller piece of land than Rob, I believe. And so I don't have the luxury, and that's forced too. Like if I wanted more land, I can farm more land. I have access to hundreds of acres that people offer me all the time. But I choose my restrictions because I find that it's where a sort of creative freedom happens. And Miles Davis talks about this too, where you know, with constraint, you become liberated in a way. And so I found that I like to have constraint because it forces me to do things, to really analyze the economics of these things. So yeah, basically what I do is I'll just say it's kale. Say Rob's got a quarter acre of kale, you know, say it's a larger farm or something, you got a quarter acre of kale, and it's not happening. Immediately reduce that down to 1,000 square feet, and then get that other land into production, just some crops that you know you can grow and sell. Keep playing with the kale to see what will work and what doesn't, because I still think that there's discovery that needs to happen in there. I mean, nature is so dynamic, and so is the marketplace, that there's always going to be a certain level of discovery that's going to happen by just engaging with something. And I think that's important to do, but I go the path of least resistance. I will not fight an uphill battle for too much longer, because the older I get, like I'm turning 36 this year, and I've been doing this for 6 years, and I worked 100 hours a week for at least 3 years. I'm running out of steam. And so I don't have much more energy to put into an uphill battle. And so my whole strategy is to follow the path of least resistance, be like water, go around things, move around things, adapt and bend. Don't push through, because it only really hurts you in the end. You just burn out.
I'd like to kind of expand on that a little bit. Curtis, you said something that I'm realizing is really, really, really important for me. You're running out of steam. You're turning 36 this year. I'm turning 38 this year, and it's hard to, and you've been at it for a little while. I'm still trying to figure out how to get going, but I digress. The one thing that I wanted to say was that in terms of figuring out what you want to grow, what works for you, what the market necessitates, I am not able to do any of that until I look at our farm operations here as a business, and I start looking at the numbers and the metrics and what I'm actually doing. It sounds, a lot of us get to the point in our lives where we want to make a change because we're sick and tired of being sick and tired. We're fed up with the status quo. We want to be the change, and that's great. It has to start there, but you can't make the change in your life based on ideology. You have to have a very deliberate approach to what you want to do if you want to make it happen in the time frame that you want to make it happen in. And I'm lucky enough to, be here talking about that with you guys and Curtis, man. I've learned so much through following your lead and identifying some of these things, saying that's it. I need to do more of that. I need to focus less on what kind of, ancient quinoa or whatever kind of, heady and free range thing I want to grow, and focus more on the, how am I going to do it? What are my inputs? What's the end result? Where am I at? How am I going to get there? And where do I want to be? And it's the focus on, you can still live with that approach of, I want to do all this, and you can still have all of that. I think it was you, Curtis, that said, put your ideology in your back pocket and do that, because you've got to, it's never lose it, but sometimes that's not the most important thing. And for me, go ahead. That's really all that I wanted to say, is that's been of utmost importance for me, is to kind of realign my thinking in terms of, this is a business, and if I want it to be a successful business, I need to treat it as such.
Yeah, and I think, it's so cool there, because when you really analyze what a good business does, and I'm not talking about the sort of cronyism that exists in the world, like these big monopolies that have special favor from the government or things like this, but when you really analyze what makes a successful business, it is humbling yourself and listening to what your customers want.
Yeah.
And there is a little bit of input from you, because I believe that we can steer people. I believe and this is why when I came up with that saying, keep your ideology in your back pocket, is that it's important to keep it, because it's important to have opinions and values and ethics. Even though we discover as we grow that some of those values and ethics were wrong. And I'm discovering things like this all the time. And that's just called growing up. But it's important to keep those things in your back pocket, because you can introject them once you create a dynamic, an interaction with your marketplace. And when I speak of the marketplace, I really believe the marketplace is an ecosystem. I believe that that human beings are just as much a part of nature as everything around us. And the marketplace is just an ecosystem. It's an ecosystem of human interaction. And the more we engage with that, we can create feedback loops where it's give and take. You've heard that old saying, or I don't know if it's the quote verbatim, but the idea is that a good relationship is a two-way street. Because if it isn't a two-way street, it's a shitty relationship. It's just a monologue from one person that never listens, and there's no back and forth. And the marketplace is that exact relationship. I find the most successful business people that I know that have been critical mentors in my life embody that 100%. Is everything is to serve. And I think that's what's so beautiful about being an entrepreneur, is that you can really serve your community or the world at large, whatever it might be. But you've got to check your ideology a little bit, but you should keep it, because you can direct people. And I've done that, but you can't do it by going in with an iron fist. That doesn't work. We've seen how that works in society and in history. You do it by interacting, humbling yourself, and it's give and take. It's, I will serve you, and then you will put ideas in there, and it becomes this dialogue. And that's what morphs into something beautiful. And it's probably something that you never imagined it would be when you started. And I know that it was in my case. So, absolutely. Yeah, I just wanted to echo that, because I totally think you're on the right path. And it's the attitude of being humble to listen, because especially people in our space, like in the permaculture space, or people that are really interested in sustainable ag and what have you, pretty big umbrella, is that a lot of people, and I'm really only speaking for myself here, but I know a lot of people will echo what I'm saying as well, is that we come in with these huge ideas, these massive ideas on how to save the world, because we've got it all figured out, right? Because we know what's best for everybody else. And this is what's led me to really adopting an anarchist philosophy, is that I accept that I don't. I accept the fact that I don't know what's best for you. And I'm okay with that. And I'm willing to listen. But when you come to me and say, I know what's best for you, I'm going to tell you to piss off, because you don't know what's best for me. But when I come as a business person to you, as an entrepreneur, I'm asking, what's best for you? How can I help you get what you're looking for? And so that could be in any business realm. In the realm of farming, it's, what can I do for you that you have a demand for? How can I service your needs? And I think what's something that's really helped me with the restaurant industry and getting in with top chefs in my area is coming to them and just saying, what do you need? What's their niche for? What can I grow for you that isn't being supplied by other people? It's just listening. It's just a two-way street. Instead of going, I want to grow this, I want to grow that, I want to grow this, because I think people should eat these things. And that's okay to a certain degree, but you can't take that to the bank, because if people aren't buying what you're selling, then it doesn't matter at the end of the day.
Thinking of the marketplace, Rob, you mentioned one of your big successes this year has been with microgreens. So how does the market relate into that? Was that something that just wasn't being served in your market and you excelled at it? Was somebody already doing it and you've done it better? How does the success tie into the microgreen side of things?
Well, I'd like to say that it is a smashing success. It's really, it's a new venture. It's, let's see, today, as a matter of fact, a good friend of mine, farmer's market friend, my friend Cody from For the Good of the Food, we had some greens at our local market, and I was explaining to him that I was having challenges figuring out the timing and all of this. And the first day I brought him to our local market, no one there had microgreens. It was a total crapshoot. Either this is going to work or it's not. I sold out in 3 hours. It was fantastic. And I didn't have enough. The next week I didn't have any available because I'm still trying to figure out how all this works. People came back, but they were asking for them. Hey, do you have this? Are you doing broccoli? Oh, no, but you know what? Next seed order, I bought some broccoli. We're going to try doing that. I sold out at our local market, but went up. Cody took a bunch of greens up to the market in Tremont, which is right downtown, a trendy neighborhood. It was a slow market day. I made $20. Oh. And after, hours of cutting greens last night and I didn't make anything. But it was, we spent a lot of time talking when all was said and done that, we're on and that can be depressing because he was up there and, I brought microgreens and coolers to work and he came to work and picked them up and he was leaving to go downtown, at 2:00 today. And we were talking at 8:30 and nothing really sold. It was a slow day. So it's hot. It's not, it works. It doesn't. And I think that what matters is I can sit here and gripe and complain about the fact that it wasn't successful today, but it was the other day and it will be again. And I know that at least locally for me and my local market, the demand is there because it proved itself already. And I will verify that in future weeks when I bring more greens to market. And because so far people have returned, they want more, and I'll keep testing that to make sure that that's the case.
And I think that's something you're going to have to do in any business. That's not exclusive to farming, is this whole idea of there's going to be hot times, there's going to be cold times. You can't give up on the first time it gets cold. And I know, Curtis, we've talked about this in a previous show where you've had these brutal weeks of all this work and then you don't make much money at the market. If you go back to when you were starting out and going through this, how did you deal with those hard times where you just weren't getting the sales on the opposite all the work that you were putting in?
Oh, man. I curled in the fetal position and cried. That's what I did. I remember the first time. It was like the first time I had a really bad market. Like, because the first few times I started at the market, it was kind of like what Rob was just talking about there. It was like, yeah, so I sold out. It was good. I mean, I didn't have a ton of product, but I came out with a few $100 or something like that, and it was great. And then I had a few of those, and I'm thinking, oh wow, I'm on it. Like, this is flying now. Like, I'm on the fast track to success kind of thing, And then I had this market that was just horrendous. It was like, I came back with 90% of the product that I brought there, and I felt so sick. That was the same time that I suffered this extreme physical burnout. I'd never had anything like this in my life. Partly because I wasn't doing things that Rob was talking about earlier, like how important it is to get sleep and, look after your health. And I wasn't at this time. Like, I was addicted to energy drinks. I was crushing like 3 Red Bulls a day just to stay sane. I wasn't sleeping because I was working probably 20 hours a day. And, and then you put in a week where you do 100 hours or something, and then you make $150 at a farmer's market. And then you also, you hear, you get some bad customers, like you say, in the grand scheme of things, it wasn't much, but you get a few customers that complain about prices or complain about product or something like that. And it's really discouraging. But I've always found the best way for me to deal with those things is to reach out to my friends and my family and, not be afraid to show vulnerability. That's one thing I learned in life 6 years ago, 7 years ago when I did my bike tour down the West Coast, is that if you go through life putting up a guard like you're this tough person or something like that, or you're all that, people won't open up to you as well. And I found that by showing humility and showing vulnerability opens you up to people. And the support of some of my really close friends back then is what kept me going. Really, I just would tell people and wasn't afraid to talk about the fact that things weren't all perfect and working out. But at the same time, I really believed in what I did, and so did the community. People really embraced what I did, and even Rob was talking about this earlier too, is like how important it is to just start. And in my experience, what happens when you align, I call it finding your alignment. When you align something that you're good at doing, that you learn through experience or whatever it is, and something you really like do, you find this alignment. And when you find that in your life, people will tune into your frequency pretty quickly because they'll see how passionate you are about it. And you can only do these things with things that you were really, really amped on. And I was stoked. I was so stoked on what I was doing. And it was never hard for me to channel that passion, even when I was physically so burnt out that I could barely walk. That you get started and it becomes like a snowball effect where your momentum, it was the hardest to get that snowball rolling. But then once it started to roll, it gained momentum. And I find that momentum is your community, is that if you can really convey and connect to a community, and this is what I love about being a farmer, but I'm sure it exists in every form of business, you connect to that community becomes your momentum, and they push you along. And during those times that I was feeling rough, I would have some neighbor walk by and just totally make my day by saying, "Hey man, I love what you're doing. This is so beautiful. Like, how can I help you?" or something like that. People would reach out to me, and that really is how I dealt with it.
Well, Curtis, and to piggyback that's so true. Because the community does become your momentum, and even if you're in a place that may not have the community that you want, which is where I was a couple of years ago, not even a couple of years ago, a year and a half ago, less than that, I took active steps to try and build that community, and boom, before you know it, all of a sudden there's this community that's thriving because everybody around you wanted it, but no one up until that point had taken steps to act as the catalyst to make it happen. And you had mentioned something earlier that said, "I accept it. I don't know what's best for you." And And sometimes it's, when you have the down day at the market or your crop fails or, man, it's so easy to get caught up in how much you suck. And, and it's, but once you've got that community and you get talking about that, then, man, you realize somebody else sucks a lot worse sometimes. And all of a sudden you guys are commiserating on how much you both suck, and you're lifting each other up out of the bad spot. And then there's some bozo maybe at the market that'll say something like, well, why are you doing this? Much like I told my parents years ago, why are you doing this? This is crazy. Mm-hmm. You can't change the world. And sometimes people have said that to me, and I said, no, you're right. I can't change the world, but I can change mine.
Yeah.
And you see them, you say that, and you see them cock their head, and what the hell is this guy talking about? But then sometimes people get it. You find your alignment, like you said, with once you do that, people tune in on that frequency you talked about. The community builds. You help maintain momentum in the community. The community helps maintain momentum with you. It's a beautiful thing when you start.
It is
following your heart and making it happen like that.
Totally, and it's something that is, I see, has been long forgotten. People are so disconnected from each other in so many different ways, and I don't think it's necessarily because everybody has an iPhone. That's the classic. Oh, everybody's staring at their phone all the time, and I don't know. People have been reading newspapers and things like that. People have been disconnected for a long time. I believe it's because we've removed the needs-benefit relationship that is the core of community. Mm-hmm. And this is what I think is so empowering about being a farmer, and this is why I want to see millions of new farmers across the United States and Canada, because I think when you are providing real value to a community, you become valuable. And then all of that stuff because none of us are perfect, none of us have, maybe some of us are. I'm not perfect. I only speak for myself. I have got character flaws. I've got bad habits. I've done some shitty things in my life. I'm not a perfect person by any means. But I do provide an incredible amount of value to my community, and I'm aware of that. And I know what my value is. I can articulate my value, and it's clear on what I bring to the table. And I find, as a farmer, for one, it's easy to that becomes an easy thing to do, and I think that's what's so great about being a farmer today, especially the kind of farming we're talking about, market gardening, where you're servicing your community, not growing crops to be exported and whatnot. Is that's an immediate value to your community, and when you have a value to your community, people will put certain things aside. And I believe that our society, Western society in general, has become more disconnected, not because of technology and not because of a variety of different things people like to blame it on. I think it's because people don't need each other in the same way that they used to. I think we've become more intolerant in society because if I live next door to somebody for 25 years in some suburban community, and I don't have a reason to know them. Say they're some kind of family that's the opposite religion of mine. Say I'm a Christian and they're a Muslim. And I don't have a reason to know them. Why am I ever going to reach out to them? But if that Muslim who lives next door to me is an amazing leather worker, and I have some kind of value that maybe I produce eggs and I've got a welding shop in my garage, then we have a reason to interact. And this is why I think that economic interactions are actually the foundation of community. Because if you don't have them, what the hell do I need to know him for? And as a farmer, it's a really fast way to get into economic interactions because, let's face it, everybody needs to eat. Yeah. So it's simple. I can get in the community. I can inject myself into a community pretty quickly when I provide a valued service that I know that everybody needs, but a lot of people will value a local farmer fresh, organic produce.
I'm totally with you there, and I love the idea that Rob brought of this whole idea you can't change the world, but you can change yours. And I think when you change yours, one thing I always say is there's a lot of trickle-down benefits to that, to the other people in your life, your family, your community, your friends, and they can all benefit from that.
There's something I want to add. This idea of, you can't change the world, but you can change yours. The beautiful thing about that is that the more you change your world and the better you get at that, your world gets a hell of a lot bigger, because you end up on shows like this. And Rob, you and I now have a relationship. I'm in British Columbia. You're in Ohio. Diego and I are buddies. He's down in San Diego. Is that we actually can change the world. But it's going to start small, and it's going to be a hell of a slog, to start. But once that momentum gets going, your world gets a lot smaller pretty quick.
Exactly, and that's so true, because I have witnessed people like yourself and Diego taking big strides to do that and change the world. That's incentivized me to try and do the same. And all I hope is that by following the lead of other people that I look to as role models, maybe someday somebody will look at me and the words that I say and the actions that I take will provide a little bit of incentive for them to do the same. And that's how the change happens, because incentive matters.
Totally.
It really does.
Along the lines of changing the world, we're also all kind of connected in another way of this whole idea around Curtis's course. And this is one thing I wanted to try and ask you about while you're here. And yeah, it's a bit of a plug for the course, but what's been your experience with taking that? And, give an honest response and say what you think about it.
Well, my experience has been awesome. And here's why. The reality is it's been hard. When I first signed up for it, I thought to myself, what am I doing? This is the last thing I need to be getting involved in. This is peak season for me, my day job. This is peak season for the farm. The last thing I need to do is get involved in another project. But I thought, no, that's precisely why I need to get involved in it. The content of the course remains available. And while I haven't been able to go through it in the amount of time that I wanted to and to be able to keep up with everything, the beauty of it is I can go through it on my own. There's an awesome forum that's built into the course. I've developed relationships with people in that course. One of the big things for me was the encouragement from Curtis and Luke to get with somebody to act as an accountability partner. And the person that I got with ultimately and hooked up with is Kurt Henry, who I first met at an Acres USA conference back in December, followed up with and spent a lot of time with at Permaculture Voices, PV2. And he's been such a good mentor, role model, big brother in a sense, that when I am feeling down and out, I can get with him and our what was weekly calls, now we're doing them bi-weekly because that's a little bit more appropriate. There's just so much good stuff, and it's in the humility that we spoke about earlier is demonstrated perfectly in this course, because the feedback that Curtis and Luke are accepting from all of us in terms of content to be included in the course as it moves forward, things that can be done differently. They're open and receptive. They listen to us. We matter. They care about us. And it's evident. And it shows. And that's my take on it from the limited involvement that I have. I can't wait until it's winter time and I have some downtime to further invest in the course, because if I've taken this much out of it so far, I can't even begin to think about what I'm going to get into when I've got the time to devote to that. It's fantastic. And it has exceeded the inputs in terms of what I spent on the course at this point, and it's going to pay for itself exponentially and what I ultimately get in return from it. It's awesome. And again, Curtis, you guys have done a great job with it. And on behalf of everybody that's taking the course, thank you. It matters.
Thanks, Rob.
And that's great to hear. I love that whole idea of the accountability partner, and I think anybody out there taking farming on or any business on, it helps to have somebody going through it with you. And I know firsthand myself, at times when it sucks, you can feel alone. And like both you guys have said throughout this show, you start talking to other people and you find out, oh, they're all going through the same thing that I am. So having somebody go through it along with you by your side just helps make everything easier. But Rob, man, I want to thank you for coming on today, sharing your story. I think you're an inspirational story. You're doing a lot more than a lot of people out there, and a lot of people don't want to take the move. You definitely don't have an easy route of it, and I commend you for taking it on and just going for it. So thanks for taking the time to do it.
Hey, thank you for the opportunity to come on and share some of that with both of you guys and the rest of the audience out there. I'm happy to share whatever it is that I have to share, and it's just a pleasure to be involved in all of this with you guys and everybody else. The farm that I work on is York Meadow Farm. We can be found on social media, Instagram and Facebook at York Meadow Farm. This winter, one of the winter projects is going to be the development of our website. We've got the domain name secured, but we're still building that up. Part of something that we really didn't touch on here was the lease agreement on the farm property is done through the business that I incorporated or formed last year, which is Deliberate Living Systems. And I do have a website, and I'm trying to move forward with that at www.deliberatelivingsystems.com. I have started a podcast of my own, in large part inspired by what you've done, Diego, and that's there's been a lot of other things going on with the lease agreement and high tunnel construction and lots of things in the work. There's many irons in the fire, and I think I need a few more fires, but it sure is keeping me on my toes, and feel free to learn more about some of the things that I'm into at those sites, and I can be reached through there, and I'm happy to correspond with anybody about anything and share information that I have and I'm learning, because that's what I love, and I just in the same way that you guys openly give it away, that's what we do. We got to give it away to keep it, and that's all I want to do.
Right on. Thanks a lot, Rob. Keep it up, man.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks for watching this episode of The Urban Farmer. Be sure to hit subscribe so you don't miss a single episode.